On this episode of 10 Forward Test Kitchen, we're tackling one of the most iconic and most infamous dishes in all of Star Trek, Klingon Gagh. You've asked for it many times, and today we're finally answering the call with a dish that honors the original intention of Gagh while still delivering something that human taste buds can pleasantly enjoy. It's a meal fit for a warrior.
That would be a glorious battle.
Relax. Better way to embrace Klingon culture than through your stomach.
Nek, Suv, Weejoop.
Nuchnek, Tehrangan, Hadibak.
So, Gagh, Kaklaw, Korgme, V-Neck, Jupe.
Gak, DJ, Turkic. HB Hecht.
Gagh Doyle?
So what is Gagh? Well, Gagh first appeared on Star Trek The Next Generation in the episode A Matter of Honor. As part of his exchange program assignment aboard a Klingon vessel, Commander Riker explores Klingon culture through food, sampling rokeg blood pie, heart of Targ, and of course, the legendary Gagh, a delicacy made from serpent worms which he learns most Klingons prefer to consume live. From there, Gagh crops up again and again across the Star Trek universe. In Enterprise, T'Pol and Hoshi discover dead Gagh aboard a Klingon scout ship trapped in a gas giant. In Lower Decks, we're told scraping the Gagh barrels is considered one of the worst jobs on a Klingon ship. Neelix attempts to serve Gagh multiple times aboard Voyager, with varying degrees of success and enthusiasm from the crew. And on Deep Space Nine, Dr. Bashir was once accidentally served a plate of live Gagh that was intended for Worf. Although the good doctor was quite partial to Klingon food, it was too early in the morning for this particular meal. According to Esri Dax, there were at least 51 different varieties of Gagh, including Bithol, which has feet, Filden, which squirms, Mishtak, which jumps, Torgad, which wiggles, and Wistan, which is packed with Targ blood. And that's a very useful piece of canon, because it explains why Gagh looks different almost every single time we see it on screen. Behind the scenes, that was very intentional. According to Voyager's prop master, Alan Sims, his brief for Klingon food was to make it look edible, yet revolting at the same time. The team used what he described as weird and odd ingredients: octopus, squid tentacles, and bizarre dried Asian seafoods, anything that looked unfamiliar, alien, and just slightly wrong. For Gagh specifically, they often used white udon noodles dyed brown with soy sauce, sesame dressing, or stir-fry sauce, and served on a bed of what is called glazhed, typically a leafy green like rocket or arugula. However, that description is different to how glazhed appears in Deep Space Nine, which was likely as wood ear mushrooms. And speaking of Deep Space Nine, props master Joe Longo confirmed that Klingon food often shared the same base as Cardassian dishes, specifically yamuk sauce. That sauce was created from a mixture of dark Karo syrup and Worcestershire sauce, blended together to achieve that deep, glossy brown colour. He also noted that whole wheat udon noodles didn't work well as they didn't take colour properly under the lights. And for some extra Klingon flair, the team would occasionally add baby crabs or oyster crabs to the noodles, making the dish resemble a bowl of large, unsettling insects. The 1999 Star Trek cookbook essentially presents recipes exactly as they were made by the production teams. But for us, noodles and bottled stir-fry sauce felt a little underwhelming. The 2022 Star Trek cookbook takes a more ambitious approach, piping minced meat into boiling water to create meat noodles. It's a clever idea, but when we tested it, it felt like it leaned a bit too far into gimmick food territory. So instead, we set out to create a version of Gagh that stays true to the original concept while still functioning as a complete, satisfying meal. Udon noodles remain the base, but we're adding vegetables, a protein, and a thick, sticky blood red sauce to feel worthy of a Klingon warrior. Starting with the sauce. To achieve that deep, visceral red colour, the kind you'd expect from something called bloodworms, we're using beetroot. We chop and roast 1 medium beetroot, not only to make it easier to puree, but also because cooking it stabilises the pigment and brings out its natural sweetness. Once roasted at 180 degrees Celsius for around 20 minutes, we go at it with a stick blender until it's as smooth as possible. That puree forms the backbone of our Gagh sauce. Into a bowl, we add 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar, 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, 3 tablespoons of honey, 1.5 tablespoons of cornflour, 3 tablespoons of water, the beetroot puree, and 1 teaspoon of chili flakes. Whisk everything together until the sauce is thick and glossy, then set it aside. Once again, it's worth noting just how widely the interpretation of Gagh varies across the franchise. In Enterprise, Gagh sometimes appears almost translucent purple, like artificial fishing bait or gummy worms. Later, it's shown as real worms, with dummy props used so actors could wiggle and eat them convincingly. In the Next Generation, it resembles egg noodles. In the Klingon interactive adventure game, Gagh is vibrant, red, and short, almost like dyed bean sprouts or shaved carrot. On Deep Space Nine, Gagh looks very much like real live worms. In fact, it seems the same worms are used to represent Rakt, a larger version of Gagh. On Voyager, Neelix's replicated Gagh is more traditionally noodle-like and often appears almost dry. And in Lower Decks, Gagh in the Klingon marketplace comes in purple, blue, and yellow varieties, right alongside the traditional colour. Since there is no single correct Gagh, that gives us a lot of creative freedom today. Next, let's prepare our vegetables. We're using 1 carrot, 1 capsicum, which you may know as a bell pepper, about 80 grams of enoki mushrooms, and 100 grams of bean sprouts. These are all fairly typical stir-fry ingredients. They bring different flavours and textures to the dish, and most importantly for Gagh, once they're coated in the sauce, they all start to look very similar. That helps sell the illusion of a bowl full of bloodworms, while still giving us a variety of bite underneath. Slice the carrot long and very thin, and do the same with the capsicum. We're aiming for strands, not chunks, so they soften quickly and bend like worms. For the enoki mushrooms, depending on how they're packaged, you'd usually want to cut off and discard the dirty base, then gently separate them into individual strands. And finally, give the bean sprouts a good rinse and drain them well. For the protein in our dish, we're using thin beef sizzle steak. Slice it into long, narrow strips, the thinner, the better. The goal is for the beef to visually blend with the noodles and vegetables once cooked. To prepare the beef for cooking, lightly marinate with half a teaspoon of cornflour, 1 teaspoon of neutral oil, like vegetable oil, 1 teaspoon of water, mix together, then set aside. Next, we prepare the udon noodles according to the packet instructions. In our case, that means in boiling water for 4 minutes, stirring continuously, then plunging into cold water before setting them aside. There's a wonderful bit of in-universe lore from Klingon for the Galactic Traveller that feels particularly appropriate here. According to the book, Gagh worms intended for consumption are fed only diluted blood, which they find unappetizing and therefore eat sparingly. The type of animal the blood comes from greatly affects the flavour of the worms. Just before serving, the worms are poured into a bowl of thick sauce containing an extremely flavourful herb, one that the worms find irresistible even though it is toxic to them and kills them within minutes. Gagh is considered best when eaten live, so it is customary to consume it as quickly as possible. If the worms die before being eaten, the entire mixture is saved and later reheated as a kind of stew. How nice. To cook the beef first, heat a wok or large pan with a neutral oil until it's very hot. Cook the beef in batches, leaving it undisturbed for about 30 seconds. Then, gently stir until the colour changes, the strips relax and go floppy, and no raw red remains. That takes about a minute. Then the beef is removed and the next batch goes in. Absorb any excess oil with a paper towel, cover and set aside. Wipe down the same wok, then add vegetable oil, followed by onion and garlic, sauteed until fragrant. Then go in the vegetables: the julienne carrot, the sliced capsicum, the separated enoki mushrooms, and the bean sprouts. They're cooked just long enough to soften. Next, the sauce is poured in and brought to the boil. Let it bubble and thicken for at least a minute. This is where the transformation happens. The beef goes back into the pan and is tossed quickly to coat. Finally, the udon noodles are drained and added to the pan, and everything is folded together until the sauce evenly coats every strand, strip, and sprout, producing a consistent red blood color throughout. Once that happens, turn off the heat. To serve, pile the gagh high on a plate. You can serve it directly like this, or place it over a bed of rocket or cooked spinach. Unfortunately, our local supply was out. For a slightly more human plating, finish with thinly sliced red chilies, spring onions, and a light scatter of sesame seeds. This is a dish best served hot, so bring it to the table immediately and feel free to give it a little wiggle on the way. And there you have it, the 10 Forward Test Kitchen interpretation of Klingon Gagh. It's visceral, it's alien, and it's unsettlingly edible. The thinly sliced vegetables, the beef, and the noodles coated in that rich red sauce create a uniform appearance that invokes the infamous worms, while beneath the surface delivering flavour and texture worthy of a full meal. A much more manageable interpretation for the human palate, and still one fit for a soldier of the Empire. If you've enjoyed this recipe, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time.